Welcome to the Upgrading USR3513 Firmware video. This video will demonstrate how to load new firmware into a USR3513 or USR803513 cellular gateway. Either system firmware or radio firmware can be loaded. First, there are a few requirements before you can get started. You'll need a computer with a web browser, an Ethernet port, and internet access, and you'll need an Ethernet cable to connect the computer to the gateway. Now, get the new firmware from the USR support webpage. Connect the computer to the local area network for internet access using the Ethernet cable or Wi-Fi, and open a web browser. Navigate the web browser to www.usr.com/support/3513. Select your location so you can access the firmware files appropriate for your region. Now, on the USR support webpage, find the latest firmware. In this demonstration, I'll update the gateway's system firmware. Click on the link to download the firmware file to the computer. Remember the version number of the new firmware, and remember where the file is saved. A system firmware file has a .zip extension. Do not unzip this file. A radio firmware file has a .bin extension. Next, log into the gateway's user interface. Use the Ethernet cable to connect the computer to the cellular gateway's LAN port. Enter the cellular gateway's IP address into the web browser. The default IP address is 192.168.10.250. If the browser displays a security warning, accept the warning to open an unencrypted HTTPS session. The gateway then prompts for a login, so enter the login credentials. The default username is admin, and the default password is password. After a successful login, the status page will appear. Now, upload the firmware to the gateway. Select Administrator on the menu bar and choose F/W Upgrade from the drop-down list. Select the firmware file. When loading system firmware, use the Select File buttons. When loading radio firmware, use the Radio Firmware Select buttons. Click the Choose File button. Navigate to the location of the firmware on the computer, select the firmware file, and click Open. Then, click the Upgrade button to install the firmware into the cellular gateway. When the firmware installation is done, the gateway will automatically reboot. The system firmware upgrade process takes approximately 12 to 13 minutes. When the reboot is done, the status page should appear. To view the status page, you may have to refresh the browser or re-enter the gateway's IP address or accept the security warning again. After the gateway is done rebooting, verify the upgrade. Confirm that the status page now displays the new system firmware version number or the new radio firmware revision. If the system firmware upgrade process was interrupted, the gateway will revert to the previous system firmware so you can retry the upload. If there's no other settings to change, close the web browser, power the gateway off, and unplug the Ethernet cable from the gateway in the computer. For more details about the Cellular Gateway, see the USR3513 User Guide, which can be downloaded from this USR support page. I hope this demonstration of upgrading the Cellular Gateway's firmware was helpful. Thank you for watching, and thank you for choosing USR.